Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining me for this webinar on writing stories using Clicker. My name is Gemma. I'm the Senior Customer Experience Consultant at Crick Software. So I support our existing customers in using Clicker effectively, and I also create and manage the training resources that are available on our website. I'm joined today by my colleague Sian, and she'll be answering your questions throughout the webinar. So for today's session, we've got about 30 minutes. And during that time, we're going to be looking at a range of resources available in Clicker that you can use to support your learners with different aspects of writing stories. So we'll be looking at resources for supporting them planning and developing their story ideas, thinking about and designing different settings and characters for their stories, and resources to support them in writing those stories up as well. And throughout the session, we'll be talking about the different ways you might want to use these resources in the classroom. First of all, a little bit of background to Crick Software, the company. So we've been around since 1993, and the company was originally created by John and Anne Crick, who were both working as teachers. And John was working in a special school with children with physical disabilities. So that's where the initial idea for Clicker came from. And over the years, we've improved Clicker, we've added more features, and it's now widely used to support both learners with special needs, but also to support literacy in general in the classroom. So I mentioned that Sian is available to ask questions during the webinar, or to answer your questions rather during the webinar. So if you do have a question, you can, and you're attending through Zoom, you can ask it using the Q&A function. If you're not too familiar with Zoom, you can use the Q&A function by clicking the button with the two speech bubbles. If you have a question and you're attending through Facebook, you can leave your question as a comment beneath the video, and we'll answer your question as soon as possible. If you're not able to attend live today, or you're watching the recording and you have a question, please do get in touch. We're always happy to help and answer any questions. You can give us a call on one of the office numbers just here. You can email me directly. And there's also lots of help and advice available on our website, including the option to book a meeting with one of our consultants, so you can ask questions about your school and your learners using Clicker. Okay. We will be recording this session, and we'll be making the recording available to anybody who registered through Zoom in the next couple of days. And a recording will also be available on the Facebook pages shortly after the end of the webinar. Thank you, everybody who has completed that first poll. It's really helpful to see who's attending today to better know which features and which ways you might be using the software. I'm just going to end that poll now. And I'm going to launch another one to find out a little bit more about how you are hoping to use Clicker to support learners with their story writing. So you can select multiple options in this poll. So if more than one applies, do feel free to select multiple. And this will help me to know which ways, which features are going to be of most use to you for me to show today. So just going to give you 30 seconds or so to fill that in and read through those options. Oh, somebody has put other, so it would be fantastic if you could add the other way you'd like to be using Clicker into the Q&A. Would love to hear the other ways you'd like to be using Clicker to support story writing. That'd be fantastic. Okay, I think we've nearly all finished voting now. I can see that's in the... Okay. A couple more seconds just to give everybody time to complete that. Okay, fantastic. So thank you, everybody, for filling that in. It is very close. As I said, a couple of people have put other, which is fantastic. And I can see, Samantha, you've just put a bit more information about that. Thank you for that. a little bit of everything for the most part, but supporting learners with story sentence structure is one of the more popular options there. So we'll be looking at that as well as other aspects of writing stories with Clicker. Thank you, everybody, for completing that poll. So let's dive into Clicker. Just so everybody's aware, I am using the UK version of Clicker today. So any spellings, any voices, they will be the English versions. And we'll be looking at how Clicker works on PC, so laptop or desktop computers, as well as through the apps on iPads and Chromebooks. And if you are using Clicker on an iPad or a Chromebook, you have access to 3 Clicker apps: Clicker Writer, Clicker Books, and Clicker Talk. Okay, and we'll be looking at all 3 of those today. So we're going to start off by looking at Clicker on PC. But the resources we look at are also available through the apps, and we'll talk a bit more about that as we go. So if you've already been using Clicker on PC, you'll be familiar with the Quick Start menu. So from here, we could start writing immediately by creating a new document and use the support tools to help us with writing there. We could create a new Clicker set, so resourcing Clicker. And we can open up any of our previously accessed Clicker files on the left-hand side here. But we're going to have a look at one of our pre-made, ready-to-use Clicker sets. So we're going to go to LearningGrids resources, just up here at the top of the window. So we have thousands of free, pre-made, ready-to-use Clicker files and Clicker resources here. And when we're looking for resources for story writing, we're going to be looking in this English subject area. Although if you haven't spent much time in LearningGrids, I do recommend having a look through these other subject areas to see what's there as well. For story writing in English, we're looking in the creative writing section just here. And we're going to start off by having a look at some resources on story planning. So we'll go into that category now. And you can see we've got nearly 40 resources available here. And the first 2 are Clicker boards. If you haven't used Clicker boards before, they're also available through the Clicker Writer app. And they're a really nice, easy to use mind mapping tool. And we'll have a look at an example with the Using Question Words resource. So in this Clicker board, we've got a selection of images as a prompt, which we can access through these tabs just here on the right-hand side. And then we've got questions to answer about those images. So this is a really great prompt for some creative writing. We need to think about who might be in the image. In this case, we don't have anybody, but there might be other people in the setting. What's happening? Where is it? When is it? Why perhaps are these people walking in this, taking this route? How is it important? How are they doing? Whatever's in the image, how are they kicking the ball in this case? So really encouraging learners to consider some of the things they might want to include in their story. And to fill this in, we can either double click or double tap on the cells, the boxes, to type in a response. Or we could drag these microphone buttons called voice notes onto our board and then double click them to make a recording in our sound recorder. So we can record learners' responses verbally first and then type those up afterwards. Okay. Let's have a look at a different resource now. So we're going to go back to LearningGrids. And to get to LearningGrids, we're going to go to the folder icon in the top left of the screen. So this takes us to our file explorer where we can open up our previously saved Clicker files. But again, we have LearningGrids resources at the top of that window to take us back to our search. So scrolling down a bit further, we've now got some talk set activities. So talk set activities are great for developing children's oral communication skills, and they can also be accessed through the Clicker Talk app. Okay, so we'll open this one up. We've got those same images offered to us here, and we can approach this activity in whatever order we would like. So I'm going to choose this second image. And here we've got 6 recording buttons, 6 voice note buttons. So we can now make recordings based on the image. And there's a few different ways we might want to approach this. We could record questions that we have about the image. We might want to record answers to predetermined questions that we've selected. Or it could be a combination. Perhaps the first 3, we ask one learner to record some questions, and then another of our learners records their responses in the other 3. So there's a few different ways that we might want to approach this activity. Okay, let's look at some other examples of different resources you might use. So I'm going back into LearningGrids again. And we're going to look at another clicker board now. This one's laid out a little bit differently. It's this fortunately, unfortunately story planner. So we'll open this one up. And here we've got a section to fill in one day and set the scene for our story, or the initial start point for our story. That might be something that we fill in to start with as the teacher or the teaching assistant. We might fill that in advance. And then we can build our story with a series of unfortunately and fortunately events. We've got some lovely images to the left-hand side to help learners to determine whether we are deciding on a positive or a negative event. And we've got the recording option again on the right-hand side, so we can record our ideas verbally first and then type it up. Okay, so this is a really nice activity to do individually. We could do this in groups. We could have pairs of children working on this. We might have a whole class working on this together to build a really creative story as a class, and encourage learners to think about perhaps some of the things, the themes, the language that has been covered earlier in the lesson. Okay, going back into LearningGrids now. And we'll scroll down a little further. There are 40 resources here, so there's lots to look through. But we're going to look at a story steps example, the Alien and the Planet Earth story version here. So there are a few different versions of this resource, but they will start with an initial image and have an ending image. And children need to decide 3 steps to get from the first image to the last. So these are a really, really nice, short, creative activity. Could potentially work really well as a starter or a plenary activity to encourage learners to think creatively. And if we want to swap these images out at any point, we can select them, go to the pictures icon up here, and we can browse for a new picture either in the Quick Picks 2 library or through any pictures we've got saved on our device. Thinking of more traditional story planning resources, we might want to use a storyboard. So if I scroll all the way down, we have some more traditional storyboards here. So one with a beginning, middle, and ending, first, then, next, last. But I really like this storyboard number 5, which gives us a story mountain. So here we can plan out the beginning, the build-up, the problem, resolution, and ending for our story. We might want to again do that as a recording, an oral recording first, and we could either type a summary into these cells, or we could use the paint tool to draw an image representing that stage in the story. So these have all been very focused on the planning stage, but we have some resources that encompass more aspects of our story planning. And these are story builders. So if we scroll down, they are just here. So we've got 1, 2, and 3, which offer slightly different approaches to building stories. And there's also a pirate story builder. So I'm going to open up the pirates version. And you can see my first board, I'm encouraged to think about a main character for a pirate story. In my next tab, I've got an option to plan out some aspects of my setting. And then I can plan out my plot with this final tab, this final page here. And similarly to the story steps, I've got a starting image and an ending image, and I need to connect those together with the events of the story. So this one combines a few different aspects of building a story into one resource. Okay, so we've had a look at some resources for planning out our stories, and we've seen that this resource encompasses character creation and setting creation, but we may want to plan out, or we may want to provide a bit more support for planning out our characters and settings. So we'll look at some resources for building characters now, and we're going to move on to looking at how that works in the apps. So staying with the pirate theme, we might want to design our character using a wanted poster. So if I open up the Clicker Books app, so this is one of our apps for iPad and Chromebook that gives us access to on-screen speech-supported books. And this is also where we can access the wanted poster activity. So just like we did on PC, I'm going to go to LearningGrids, and this resource is also available on PC if you go into LearningGrids on your computer. So I've gone to the bar just here to bring down my toolbar. And if I go to the folder icon on the left-hand side, again, I can access LearningGrids. And I've got nearly 700 Clicker books here, which are also available through LearningGrids to access on your laptop or desktop computer. If we go back into that English subjects area and choose characters, you can see we've got some wanted poster activities 1 and 2. So I'm just going to open up the second one, and we'll need to go into edit view for this activity by clicking the pen icon. Okay. So here, we can select our picture box just here on the left-hand side, and we can use the paint tool in the app to draw our pirate character. And then if we go to the text box, we can either double click or double tap it to start writing a description of our pirate character. And we've got vocabulary to help us with that. So we've got some titles here that we can use to build their name. We've got some descriptive words for describing their appearance and encouraging learners to use subject-specific vocabulary. We've got some vocabulary for describing what they're like as a character. And it is a wanted poster, so we've got some suggestions for their crimes as well. And the great thing with the word banks in Clicker Books is just like the other resources throughout Clicker, they're speech supported. So we can right-click, or we can use our sound shift button just here to listen to any of the words in this resource to make sure that we're happy with the words that we're using in our writing. Okay. So that's one activity that we might want to use for developing a character, particularly a pirate character. But perhaps we're doing some writing about superhero stories. So if we go to the Clicker Writer app now, so this is another of our apps for iPads and Chromebooks that's focused around the writing aspects of literacy. So here I've got one of my writing grids where we can build a description of a monster, great for building an antagonist for your stories. And we also have access to Clicker boards with this tab here at the top of the screen. So I've got a mind map here for describing the weather at the moment. But we're looking for some resources on superhero characters. So we're going to go to the folder icon up here in the top left of our screen again and choose LearningGrids. And if we go back into English and make sure to choose characters, we've got some great resources for designing and describing different characters. So I'm just going to open up this Clicker board first of all, okay, on if I was a superhero. So here we can give our superhero a name. We can think about what their costume might look like, what their powers would be like, and we can start working a bit on our backstory in terms of how they got their powers and their best adventure. Perhaps we're at the writing stage and we want to encourage learners to use vocabulary specific to describing superheroes and their arch enemies. So if we go back into LearningGrids, we have some lovely word banks to support learners in that writing. So we're going to open this one up And you can see now, instead of my describing a monster connect set, I've got key vocabulary that I might use to describe a superhero. And in this second tab here, I've got vocabulary that I can use to describe an arch enemy. And just like I mentioned with our wanted poster for the pirate, we can right click.
Diabolical.
To hear these keywords read out. Or iPad users, you can't right click, so we can use sound shift, this blue button here, and tap on any word.
Malicious.
To hear that word read out. Okay, so this is really great for your more independent learners who need some support with their with key vocabulary. Okay. We might also want to encourage learners to think about describing their characters verbally, first of all. So for that, the Clicker Talk app is a great resource. So this is the third of the apps that's available on iPad and Chromebook. So we'll go to LearningGrids in this app, just like we did in Clicker Books. So we'll go to the bar at the top of the screen to bring down our toolbar, and then go to the folder icon, and we have LearningGrids available just here. And going back into characters, we've got another resource on superheroes, or we might want to plan out our fancy creatures that might feature in our stories. So we can select the creature we want to describe. And this resource has 4 recording options. So we can record 4 different elements of our description, which we can then use in our writing. Okay. So we've seen lots of resources now for planning our story, describing our characters. Let's have a look at settings now. We're going to stay in the Clicker Talk app for the moment. And we'll go back into LearningGrids. But this time we're going to go into the settings place category. So we've got 2 settings options, place and time. We're starting in place. And here you can see we've got some resources for different settings. So we'll open up this spooky house one. I really like the spooky house image. I think there's a lot that we can use there to prompt us with descriptions. And when we click or tap on the image, it takes us to the recording page. And we've got 6 recording options again, which is a fantastic number for this style of resource, because we could use the first to record a general description. The setting's taking place at night, it looks foggy, things like that. But then we can use the remaining 5 to think about descriptions relating to the different senses. What things can we see in the picture? What might we be able to hear or smell or feel, which is a really nice way of helping learners to really ground their descriptions of settings in kind of time. Okay, so we could use this talk set, or going to Clicker Writer now and back into LearningGrids. We go back into that same category, settings place. You can see we have a Clicker board with that same setting. So if we open this one up, we've got that same image, and we can gather ideas as a class or as a group now. So we've done some recordings. What vocabulary did you come up with? Would anybody like to share a sentence that they're particularly proud of that we can add in to the cells around our Clicker board? Perhaps we want to offer some suggestions of vocabulary that learners should use in their writing as well. So if we go back into LearningGrids in Writer, and I'm just going to narrow this down to word banks. We've got some word banks offering useful vocabulary for describing different settings. So for example, the spooky house description, we've got some lovely adjectives and nouns that we might want displayed on our board for learners to refer to while they're making those initial recordings in their Clicker Talk activity. Okay. For the learners that need some more support in structuring their descriptions, we might want to use a connect set instead. So if I take this setting the scene, the house example, okay, here we've got some sentences that we can build describing a setting. So we can click or tap to build our piece of writing. And we've still got that speech support if we want to listen through these first.
A creaking door. Whispering.
Okay. We've got and over here, so we can extend our sentence as well as our punctuation. And when we end our sentence.
As I walk into the house, I hear a creaking door and whispering.
Okay. And then we can use the arrow to move to the next grid and continue describing. And the great thing with this resource is we start with what we can hear. We then look at what we can smell, what we can feel, and what we can see is our last option, because often children find that describing what they can see is the easiest option. So we're really encouraging them to think about different things that they can use, or different senses they can use to describe their setting. So we've looked a lot at the setting place resources. Let's have a look at the setting resources for time. So if we just pop back into LearningGrids now. Okay. So we've got that describe the weather clicker board that we saw earlier for helping children to think about how they might describe different weather conditions in their settings. Or we've got resources for supporting learners in describing different seasons, so they can place their setting at different points in time throughout the year and change the tone and feel of their settings as part of that. So we've had a look at planning our stories. Let's have a look at some of the resources we might use to write our stories. So we're going to pop back over to clicker on PC now. So back to our lovely pirate story builder here. And we'll go back to LearningGrids to see what other resources we have available. So this time we're looking in the story writing category. And the first resource here is a really nice example of a resource that you can use to support your more independent writers. So this is looking at writing a fantasy story, and it's giving us some characters that we could include in our story. Some key places that we might use as part of our settings, and we could tie this to some of the settings work that we've done previously. We've got resources on forests, we've got spooky houses, wastelands, lots of different options there. The nouns for different objects that we might encounter in our story, useful verbs, and adjectives that we can use to describe our places and our nouns. So this is a really nice resource for supporting learners who need some key vocabulary to support them in their writing, but they are writing independently. For those learners who know the words that they want to use, but they struggle with the spellings, we might instead want to use something like the Fantasy Story A to Z resource. So similar to the previous word bank, but we've got more vocabulary offered here, and it's organized alphabetically. So if we click through a few of the letters here, we've got words beginning with C, G, M, P, for example. So lots of vocabulary, but learners are going to need the words, need to know the words that they want to use to be able to search for them effectively in the resource. Thinking now of the learners who need a bit more support with their writing, we might want to use a connect set instead. So we've seen a connect set with our describing a house resource, but if I just set this to connect sets, we've got some to support the structure of story writing as well. So I really like this write a traditional story resource here. So this gives us some options to help us to build our traditional story in this case. So I'm a big fan of starting with Once Upon a Time. There was let's go for Beautiful Fairy for this one. We could add more characters, or we can just end our sentence.
Once upon a time, there was a beautiful fairy.
And click or read our sentence back, encouraging us to proof our sentence, make sure that it makes sense. We can then continue, so where do they live? So she lived in a, and we might want to use our speech support to plan out our sentence beforehand. Do we want a
small forest?
Do we want a
huge palace?
Or perhaps a
shining castle?
Okay, so we can then, when we've decided, add those into our document and listen back to our whole sentence to make sure that we're happy with it.
She lived in a shining castle.
Okay, so a really great resource for providing some structure, but still giving learners a lot of choice, and they can always type into the document if they want to add something that isn't offered by the resource. Okay. Okay, we are now coming to the end of the webinar. So I'm just going to display our contact information again in case you would like to note that down. Okay, I do hope you found this session useful. If you still have questions, please do continue to add them into the Q&A. We'll still be available to answer questions, but if you need to leave, that's absolutely fine. When you leave the webinar, a survey will open in your browser. We'd really appreciate it if you could take a minute or two to fill that in so we can continue to offer high quality webinars. Okay, thank you everybody for joining me today, and I hope you'll have a lovely rest of your day.